She spent years searching for a way to hear her autistic daughter Lily speak. But it was the black nanny's gentle whisper that broke the silence and shattered her guarded heart. The morning light crept gently into the quiet upscale suburban home, slipping through half-closed blinds in pale stripes that fell across the polished hardwood floors. Outside, the street was lined with trimmed hedges and early joggers waving to neighbors, but inside the air was still, the kind of hush that clings to a house that has known too many silences. In the kitchen, a soft humming threaded through the quiet. David's voice was low, warm, carrying the familiar cadence of comfort as he knelt to tie the shoelaces of a small girl sitting on the edge of a chair. David, a young black man in his late 20s, wore simple clothes, his hair pulled back loosely, a softness in his face that seemed to steady the room around him. Lily, a small girl with tousled blonde hair and wide blue eyes, sat quietly, clutching a small plush rabbit to her chest. She rocked slightly, the tip of the rabbit's ear brushing against her cheek in a slow rhythm. Her eyes focused on David's hands as he looped the laces with patient precision. Lily rarely spoke, the weight of her silence as present in the home as the ticking of the clock on the wall. Each moment passing like a gentle nudge that she existed in a world most people couldn't enter. From the staircase, Dr. Ellis watched. Her hand rested on the rail, knuckles pale, her professional clothes slightly loosened from a restless night of on-call emergencies and half-finished cups of coffee. Her posture was tense, shoulders sloped with exhaustion, but her eyes were alert, observing the scene below with a distance that had become habit. A respected pediatric surgeon, Dr. Ellis was accustomed to diagnosing, fixing, providing answers. But here in her own home, she stood powerless before the soft, invisible wall that separated her from her daughter. Lily's eyes lifted, meeting David's, and for a moment, the house seemed to breathe around them. David's humming slowed as he tied the final knot, his fingers brushing gently against Lily's small hands, steadying them. He leaned forward, his hair falling slightly as he lowered his voice, whispering something that Dr. Ellis could not hear from where she stood. Lily's lips trembled. The plush rabbit stilled against her cheek as her mouth moved, forming around a shape of a sound not yet released. David nodded, encouraging, his eyes bright, his smile small but full of hope. And then it happened. A single sound, soft, uncertain but real, slipped from Lily's lips. Dr. Ellis's breath caught in her chest. The moment so sharp that it felt like a scalpel had pressed against something tender within her. Lily looked up at David, her eyes blinking rapidly, as if even she was surprised by the noise she had made. And David's smile widened, his hand brushing her cheek gently. Dr. Ellis had spent thousands on the best therapists for her daughter. But it was the nanny's gentle whisper that made her say her first word. The thought echoed in the quiet space of the stairwell, pressing against Dr. Ellis's chest, leaving her rooted to the spot. All the appointments, the specialists, the tests, the carefully structured therapies, they had brought progress in inches, if at all. And now, in the quiet of a morning drenched in soft light, it was David's whisper that cracked open the silence. Lily's small face lit with a shy, fleeting smile as David squeezed her hand. He hummed again softly, a song that felt like home, while Lily clutched her rabbit, eyes following him with quiet trust. Dr. Ellis's hand tightened around the stair rail, the cool wood digging into her palm as she tried to steady herself against the swirl of disbelief and something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The sunlight shifted, sliding across David and Lily like a soft promise, while Dr. Ellis stood frozen, unable to process the moment that would begin to change everything she thought she knew about her daughter and herself. The steady beep of a heart monitor and the rhythmic hiss of a ventilator filled the operating room as Dr. Ellis guided the surgical team with practiced precision. Her gloved hands moved with the calm confidence that came from years of training, the overhead lights reflecting off the metal instruments as she made careful, deliberate incisions. The anesthesiologist adjusted the levels. Nurses moved like shadows around her. And outside the frosted glass, a waiting room filled with hope and fear remained silent. "Beautiful work, doctor," one of the younger residents murmured, eyes wide with admiration. Dr. Ellis nodded, but the praise slid off her like rain on glass. Her eyes focused on the sutures, but inside her mind was elsewhere, replaying the soft hush of David's hum and the single uncertain sound that had slipped from Lily's lips that morning. She had seen miracles in her line of work, watched tiny hearts beat again under her hands. But nothing had prepared her for the fragile, unguarded moment of hearing her daughter's voice for the first time. Even as she scrubbed out, warm water washing over her hands, the memory clung to her, pulsing in the quiet space of her mind, demanding to be felt. Back at home, the sun moved across the living room, leaving shifting patterns of light and shadow on the rug where David sat with Lily. He wore simple clothes today, his hair pulled back loosely, a few strands falling around his face as he leaned forward, gently pushing a small, colorful sensory toy toward Lily. The toy rattled softly, beads inside shimmering under the light, and Lily watched it with cautious interest, her small hand hovering above it before she finally touched it, making the beads dance. David smiled softly, humming a gentle tune, the sound wrapping around the room like a protective layer. Lily's eyes flicked up to him, and for a moment, the world seemed to slow, the tension in her small shoulders easing as she watched his hands move. Each day was a quiet routine, filled with repetition and soft encouragement. David had learned the subtle signs Lily gave when she was overwhelmed. The way her fingers fluttered near her ears, the way her eyes darted toward the window when the noise grew too loud. He moved at her pace, respecting the unspoken boundaries while offering moments of gentle challenge. Puzzle piece, a word spoken softly. A song hummed near her ear. In the quiet moments between play and snack time, David noticed the small clues scattered around the house. A photo on the mantel showed Dr. Ellis standing beside her husband, a man with warm eyes and a radiant smile, his hand resting protectively over her round belly, the edges of the photograph slightly worn from years of moving frames. A locked study door near the hallway always caught David's eye, the polished brass handle reflecting the light, untouched fingerprints marking where Dr. Ellis would pause before moving away, as if unable to turn the handle. One afternoon, while picking up Lily's toys, David found a child's drawing half hidden under the rug near the coffee table. A crayon sketch of a small family, a figure with glasses, a figure with curls, and a tiny figure holding their hands. The crayon colors were bright, but the page was creased, the drawing nearly forgotten under the patterns of the rug. David gently folded it and placed it in Lily's toy box, his fingers lingering over the bright colors before closing the lid. Neighborhood parents watched from across the street, whispering behind coffee cups and phone screens, their eyes flicking over David as he walked Lily through the yard, letting her touch the leaves and feel the breeze on her skin. Their words were soft, coated in smiles when David glanced their way, but sharp enough to sting when his back was turned. He seems nice enough, but you know how these things go. I wonder if he's really qualified, with everything going on these days. David heard them, but he let the words fall away, focusing on Lily's small laugh as a butterfly passed by, her fingers reaching toward the sky with a rare bright smile on her face. At night in his small room above the garage, David sat with a worn leather journal open in his lap. The lamp beside him cast a warm glow over the pages as he wrote in small, careful letters. Today. Lily touched the toy on her own. She looked me in the eyes. She smiled when I hummed the song. She is trying. His pen paused and he wiped a tear before it could stain the page. He never told anyone about the journal. Never shared the small victory he witnessed with the world. It wasn't his to announce. Not when every small moment was a piece of Lily's quiet journey. He closed the journal, pressing his hand over the cover, breathing deeply in the silence of the night. He could still feel the warmth of Lily's hand in his, the trust in her gaze. And he promised himself he would protect these small moments, no matter how unseen they remained. In another part of the house, Dr. Ellis sat in the dark, her professional clothes loosened, her mind replaying the morning again and again. The silence of the home felt heavier that night, pressing against her, reminding her of all the spaces where laughter used to live, and somewhere in the quiet, cracks began to form beneath the surface of a woman who had spent too long pretending she didn't need to feel. The evening air in the house was warm, touched with the faint scent of lavender from the diffuser. David kept in the corner to help calm Lily. The low hum of the dryer rumbled softly in the background, and the golden glow of the lamp spilled across the rug where David and Lily sat together. A small pile of sensory blocks lay between them, their bright colors soft under the lamp light, the edges rounded, beads inside clicking when shaken. Lily's small hands moved slowly, picking up a green block and placing it carefully atop a yellow one. Her blue eyes fixed on the tower with deep concentration. Her plush rabbit rested beside her, forgotten for the moment as she focused, the tip of her tongue peeking out between her lips. David sat cross-legged, leaning forward slightly, his hair falling softly around his face as he watched her, humming a quiet tune under his breath. It was a lullaby he barely remembered learning, something that came to him like a memory wrapped in warmth, a melody that made Lily's shoulders relax whenever he hummed it. Lily's hand hovered over a red block, pausing midair, her eyes flicking up to David. He smiled, nodding gently, encouraging her to continue, his voice low and soft. "You're doing so well, Lily," he whispered. So well." She blinked, her mouth moving slightly, lips shaping around a sound that caught in the back of her throat. David tilted his head, his hum slowing, his eyes meeting hers with patient, steady warmth, and then so softly it almost blended with the hum. Lily's lips moved, and the word fell into the quiet. "Mama." David froze, the breath in his chest catching so quickly, it felt like the world had stopped around him. The blocks fell softly from Lily's hand, rolling across the rug as she looked at him, confusion and hope warring in her small eyes. "Mama," she said again, clearer this time, the word round and gentle, as if she was tasting it for the first time. David's hand flew to his mouth, tears welling, his eyes blurring as he tried to swallow the sob that threatened to break free. He reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from Lily's forehead, his fingers trembling. "Lily," he whispered, his voice shaking. "That's beautiful. You're so brave." He wanted to tell her she didn't need to call him that he wasn't her mama, but the moment was too fragile, too precious to correct him. Instead, he hummed again, the melody catching on his tears, his other hand covering his heart as he watched her, the glow of the lamp turning the tears on his cheeks into tiny streaks of light. The front door opened quietly, the hinges creaking slightly as Dr. Ellis stepped inside, the cold night air clinging to her coat. Her shoulders slumped with exhaustion, the weight of another long day at the hospital pressing down on her as she slipped off her shoes, rubbing the tension from the back of her neck. She paused when she heard David's humming, the soft tune drifting through the hallway, wrapping around her like something familiar, something that pulled at memories she had tried to bury. Her brow furrowed and she moved closer, her footsteps silent on the wooden floor as she approached the living room. And then she heard it. "Mama." The word was so clear it struck her like a blow, stopping her in the doorway, her eyes wide, her breath frozen in her chest. "Mama." Lily's small voice repeating the words softly as David hummed, the sound of it so warm, so alive that for a moment the world fell away. Dr. Ellis's eyes fell on Lily, sitting cross-legged on the rug, looking up at David with a shy, delighted smile, her hands reaching out as she repeated the word again and again like a small song. "Mama, Mama." David's eyes were wet with tears, his hand trembling as he held Lily's. His lips curved into a soft, shaking smile as he hummed, encouraging her gently. The scene hit Dr. Ellis with the force of a wave, crashing over her, flooding her with memories of late nights, the sound of her husband's voice, the way he would hum that same lullaby to her as she rocked her belly, whispering promises to the child they would soon meet. And now here was David sitting in her living room with her daughter calling him Mama. Her vision blurred with a sudden hot anger that she didn't know how to hold back. "Stop." Her voice cut through the warmth of the room like a shard of glass, sharp and cold. David's humming died in his throat, his head snapping up, eyes wide as he looked at her. "Dr. Ellis," he said. "Stop." She stepped forward, her hands clenched at her sides, her breath coming in ragged pulls as she tried to contain the chaos swirling in her chest. "You think you can replace him?" she demanded, her voice cracking. You think you can just come into this house, into her life and take his place? David's lips parted, words trying to form, but nothing came out. He shook his head, tears spilling down his cheeks as he tried to reach for Lily's hand. But Lily flinched, pulling back, confusion and fear filling her small eyes. I was only trying to help, David whispered, his voice barely there. Get out. The words were final, heavy, leaving no room for argument. David's breath caught, his shoulders shaking as he stood slowly, his eyes dropping to Lily, who was now clutching her rabbit, rocking slightly, the word mama still on her lips. Like a prayer, David backed away, his tears falling freely, leaving silent streaks down his cheeks as he moved past Dr. Ellis, who stood frozen, unable to look at him, unable to look at her daughter. The door closed softly behind him, the quiet that followed louder than any argument could have been. And in the silence, Lily whispered the word one last time. Mama? Dr. Ellis closed her eyes, the sound tearing into her, breaking something open that she had held shut for far too long. David's shoes felt too heavy as he climbed the narrow stairs to his small apartment, the faded carpet muffling each reluctant step. His hands clutched the small leather journal pressed against his chest, the pages inside trembling as much as his heart. When he reached his door, he stood there for a moment, his forehead resting against the cool wood, letting the weight of the night sink into his bones. Inside, the apartment was quiet. A tiny kitchen, a small couch and a single lamp casting a pool of warm light that could not chase away the ache that followed him home. David sank onto the couch, pulling his knees up to his chest, the journal still pressed against him as if it were the only thing holding him together. He opened it slowly, flipping through the pages filled with careful looping handwriting. Tiny victories, small details, notes about the way Lily would smile when he hummed, how she would reach for his hand when she was overwhelmed, the colors that calmed her, the foods that made her laugh. He traced his fingers over the ink, tears blurring his vision as he remembered the soft sound of her voice, the way she had looked at him with trust and innocence, calling him a word he had never deserved to hear. Mama. The word was a blessing and a curse echoing in the silence of the apartment, leaving David shattered, wondering if he had overstepped, wondering if he had taken something that was never his to hold. Meanwhile, in the large cold house on the other side of town, Dr. Ellis sat in the dark, the glow of the street lights outside barely touching the edges of the living room where she sat alone. Her elbows rested on her knees, her hands gripping her hair as she tried to steady the chaos that had erupted inside her. Her mind kept returning to the sound of Lily's voice, the way her small lips had shaped that word, the light in her eyes. As she had looked up at David, it was a sound Dr. Ellis had waited years to hear, a sound she had hoped would heal the chasm between her and her daughter. But when it came, it was not for her. It was for him. And beneath the anger, beneath the fear, guilt sat heavy on her chest. She stood, pacing through the dark halls of the house, pausing outside the door to the locked study. Her hand hovered over the doorknob, fingers brushing the cold metal before pulling back as she always did. She turned instead toward Lily's room, pushing the door open quietly. Lily was asleep, her small body curled around her plush rabbit, the blanket kicked halfway off, her hair a golden halo against the pillow. Dr. Ellis stepped closer, pulling the blanket up gently, her fingers trembling as they brushed against Lily's cheek. That it had been so long since she had touched her daughter like this, so long since she had allowed herself to be close, afraid that if she did, the pain would swallow her whole. She glanced down at the pillow, frowning when she saw a corner of David's leather journal peeking out from underneath. Carefully, she lifted it, the leather warm from where Lily had held it close. Dr. Ellis sat in the hallway, the journal heavy in her hands. Slowly, she opened it, the pages rustling softly as she flipped through David's meticulous notes. Lily smiled today when I hummed. She touched the blue block without prompting. She made eye contact when I sang the soft part of the song. Each entry was a window into the moments Dr. Ellis had missed. Moments that had unfolded quietly while she hid in her work, convincing herself she was doing what was best for her daughter. Her vision blurred as she turned the pages, each line etched with care, filled with details she had never noticed. The foods that Lily preferred, the texture of clothes that calmed her, the way she responded when David sang, and they're written softly in David's careful script, she calms. When I hum the lullaby, it feels familiar to her, like something she already knows. Dr. Ellis's breath caught in her throat, a memory crashing over her like a wave. Her husband, humming a soft, lilting tune as he cradled her belly. His eyes had met hers, filled with hope and love, the melody wrapping around them like a promise. Sing to her, he had whispered one night, placing her hand on her belly. Let her know our voice. But she never did. When he was gone, taken in a moment of pain and blood and panic, she had locked the memory away, shutting the door to the part of herself that could not bear the sound of his song without feeling like it would shatter her. Now, here was David humming that same lullaby, unknowingly calling out to Lily in a language of love and memory that she could understand. The song was not David's. It was her husband's. A piece of him that had somehow found its way back into the house, into Lily's heart. Through David's gentle hum, Dr. Ellis closed the journal, pressing it against her forehead as tears slipped down her cheeks. Silence of the house pressed in around her, but for the first time, she let herself feel it. Let herself grieve for the moments lost, for the laughter that had never filled these walls, for the love she had denied herself and her daughter. And in that grief, a truth settled in. David had not replaced her husband. He had helped her daughter remember him. And in his quiet, gentle way, David had helped Dr. Ellis remember it, too. The dawn came slowly, filtering through the tall windows of the Ellis home, casting soft golden lines across the polished floors. Dr. Ellis sat at the kitchen table, David's leather journal open in front of her, the pages heavy with his careful handwriting and the weight of truth she had ignored for far too long. She ran her fingers over a page, pausing at the notes about Lily's reactions to the lullaby. Her mind kept drifting back to the way David's hum had filled the house with warmth, the way Lily's shoulders would soften, her small hands unclenching as the melody wrapped around her like a blanket that had been the same lullaby her husband used to hum in the quiet moments standing in the nursery they had painted together, holding her hand as he hummed softly to the life growing inside her. Sing to her even when she can't hear you yet, he had once said, pressing her hand against her belly. Let her know love before she knows the world. The memory pierced through the shell she had built around herself, shaking something loose inside her. Later that morning, Dr. Ellis found herself searching through old files in the dusty study she had kept locked for years. The air smelled of old wood and forgotten paper, each drawer a tomb of a life she had locked away. Her fingers shook as she opened a file labeled Client Records, Mark Ellis, MSW, her husband's name in neat letters across the top. She flipped through intake forms, notes scribbled in his handwriting, small details about clients he had cared for. One file caught her eye, David Brooks. Her breath caught as she read the notes. David had come to the clinic years ago, scared, alone, his eyes red from crying. He was young, barely out of his teens, facing a profound loss. He wasn't ready for the weight of grief and loneliness pressing down on him. And there in his husband's handwriting, Client comforted, spent extra time with him after his loss, held his hand while he cried, hummed lullaby to calm him, told him he was loved. Dr. Ellis's hands trembled as tears slipped down her cheeks. She could almost see Mark there sitting beside a young David holding his hand, humming that same lullaby while David wept into his palms, his world falling apart. It was no wonder David had known the song. He had heard it from Mark long before Lily was born, long before Dr. Ellis's world had shattered. The song had been a gift, a promise of love passed from one hurting soul to another. The realization settled in her chest with both weight and warmth. David had not come into their lives to replace Mark. He had come to help Lily remember the warmth of a father's love. And in his quiet, gentle way, David had helped Dr. Ellis remember it, too. That evening, Dr. Ellis stood in front of David's small apartment door, her hands shaking as she knocked, her breath caught in her throat. The hallway smelled faintly of old paint and lavender. the sounds of distant laughter from neighbors, muffled by the walls. The door opened slowly, and David stood there, his eyes red from crying, his hair slightly messy. He looked at her, surprise and hesitation in his gaze, his hands gripping the edge of the door for balance. For a moment, they stood in silence, the air heavy between them, filled with everything that had been unsaid. Dr. Ellis swallowed hard, her voice low and rough as she spoke. "I didn't understand," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't see what you were doing, what you were giving her, what you were giving us." David's lips trembled, his eyes glistening as he shook his head softly. "I wasn't trying to take his place," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I just wanted her to feel safe, to feel loved." Dr. Ellis's eyes closed as the tears spilled over, sliding down her cheeks unchecked. When she opened them again, she looked at him with a softness that had not been there before, a vulnerability she had kept hidden for years. "You're the reason she spoke," she said, her voice breaking. "You're the reason I heard her voice. You gave her something I didn't know how to give." David's breath caught, a sob breaking free as he covered his mouth, tears streaming down his cheeks. Dr. Ellis reached out, hesitating for a moment before gently placing her hand over his. "Please," she whispered, "come back. She needs you. I need you to help me learn how to be what she needs." David's tears fell as he looked into her eyes, seeing not the cold, distant doctor she had once known, but a mother desperate to love her daughter the way her husband would have wanted her to. He nodded, wiping his tears with the back of his hand, his breath shaky. "I'll come back," he whispered. "For Lily." Dr. Ellis nodded, her shoulders shaking as she let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding, the smallest broken smile touching her lips. That night, as David returned to the Ellis home, Lily's eyes lit up when she saw him, her small feet carrying her across the living room as she reached for him, the words slipping from her lips softly. "Mama!" David knelt, pulling her into his arms, whispering gently. "David," he corrected softly, tears in his eyes as he smiled. "David's here." And as Dr. Ellis watched, the home that had once felt empty began to fill with the warmth of love, grief, and healing, reminding them all that love once given never truly leaves. It lives on quietly in the songs we hum and the hands we hold. David stepped back into the Ellis home with slow, careful steps, his heart thudding as the door clicked shut behind him. The soft scent of lavender still hung in the air, mingling with the faint warmth of the evening sun filtering through the windows. For a moment, he stood quietly, letting the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock steady his breath. Then he heard the sound of small, hurried footsteps. Lily appeared at the end of the hallway, her plush rabbit clutched in one hand, her eyes wide with recognition. For a split second she froze, the world holding its breath with her. And then with a cry that was half laugh, half sob, she ran. "Mama," she called out, her voice clear and ringing through the house, the word bursting from her like a song long, trapped in her chest. David dropped to his knees, tears welling in his eyes as he opened his arms. Lily threw herself into his embrace, burying her face in his shoulder, her small body trembling with the joy of being held. David closed his eyes, pressing his cheek against her soft hair, letting his tears fall into the curls that smelled faintly of soap and sunshine. He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, his hands cupping her small face. "David," he corrected softly, his voice shaking as he smiled through his tears. "David's here." Lily blinked, her lips moving as she tried to form the word, her brows furrowed in concentration before she whispered, "No, me." David's laughter broke free, quiet and full as he nodded, kissing her forehead gently. "That's perfect, sweetheart." In the doorway, Dr. Ellis watched, her hand gripping the frame as she tried to steady the flood of emotions rising in her. She had stood there so many times, watching from a distance, but this time she let herself step forward. David looked up, his eyes meeting hers, a soft, unspoken understanding passing between them. She lowered herself to the floor beside them, the hardwood cool against her palms as she sat cross-legged facing her daughter. Lily turned, her blue eyes bright with curiosity and trust, holding her rabbit tightly as she leaned against David. Dr. Ellis took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a calming moment before letting the melody slip from her lips. A low, careful hum, shaky at first, then steadier as she continued. It was the lullaby she had buried deep inside. The one she had once hummed with Mark. The one she had sworn she would never hum again because it hurt too much. David joined her, his voice soft, wrapping around hers in gentle harmony. The two of them humming together, filling the house with a warmth that felt like sunlight breaking through a long storm. Lily's eyes widened, her lips curving into a smile, and then for the first time in months she laughed. It was a light tinkling sound, the kind of laughter that made the air feel lighter, that made the shadows in the corners of the room retreat. She clapped her hands, bouncing slightly as she giggled, the joy bubbling up from deep within her. Do that. Dr. Ellis's eyes filled with tears, her breath catching as she reached out, letting her hand rest on Lily's small back. Lily didn't flinch this time. Instead, she leaned into the touch, pressing closer to her mother and David. As the laughter continued, the house, once cold and quiet, now felt alive again. The laughter echoed through the rooms, blending with the soft hum of the lullaby, weaving warmth into the walls that had held too much grief for too long. In the days that followed, David continued to help Lily, moving through the routines that made her feel safe, celebrating each small victory with quiet pride. He taught her to point to colors, to clap to rhythms, to shape sounds into words that built bridges between her and the world. Dr. Ellis began to learn, too. She watched David closely, mimicking the way he would lower himself to Lily's level, the way he would wait patiently for her to respond, the way he would hum softly when the world felt too loud. She began to read to Lily at night, her voice unsure at first, but growing steadier with each page turned. They became a team, David's gentle presence guiding them, helping Dr. Ellis discover the mother she had hidden beneath layers of grief and fear. One evening, as the sun set in streaks of golden pink across the sky, Dr. Ellis stood by the window watching David and Lily play with bubbles in the yard. Lily's laughter floated up to her, mingling with David's soft hum as he blew bubbles that danced in the warm breeze. She closed her eyes, letting the sounds sink into her, letting herself feel the warmth that had returned to her home, the love that now filled its corners. And in that moment, a truth settled quietly in her heart. Sometimes the voices we ignore carry the healing we need most. Love is not replaced. It is remembered, passed on, and shared. David looked up, meeting her gaze through the window, and smiled, lifting a hand in a small wave as Lily laughed, chasing the bubbles across the yard. And for the first time in a long time, Dr. Ellis smiled back, feeling the weight lift, as love returned to a house that was finally truly alive again.